welcome everyone. My name is Kirsten Gilardi. I'm the Executive Director of Gorilla Doctors. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very happy to be spending the next hour with you. These GD live events are really energizing. It's like for all of us at Gorilla Doctors, we can feel your support and your enthusiasm for our work through cyberspace. So thank you for that. If you are a GD Live super fan, you will notice that this year we are mixing it up a bit. Today, we are going to highlight our long-term partnership with Virunga National Park, the oldest national park in Africa. We're going to have a really fascinating conversation with Dr. Eddie, our head veterinarian in DR Congo, and with Virunga National Park's visionary leader and our good friend, Emmanuel de Merode. We'll make sure there's time at the end for your questions, so please use the Q&A button on your Zoom screen, and we'll try to answer as many of your questions as we can. But before I bring Emmanuel and Eddie on screen, we have a very exciting announcement from our friends at the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium. Hi, Jan.
Hey, Kirsten.
This is, for everyone, this is Dr. Jan Raymer, the Senior Vice President of Animal Care and Conservation at the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium in the Wilds. And she serves on the Gorilla Doctors Board of Directors. Jan, thanks so much for joining us to share some really wonderful news.
Thanks, Kirsten. It's really great to be here, and we're so happy to help Gorilla Doctors. The Columbus Zoo has actually been supporting Gorilla Doctors through our Partners in Conservation program since 1995.
I know, for nearly 30 years now, Columbus Zoo and its Partners in Conservation organization are among our longest standing donors for and supporters of our Gorilla Doctors and their work.
Yeah, Gorilla Doctors are true conservation heroes in my book, and for that reason, we're increasing our support. This year, the Columbus Zoo is funding the first permanent laboratory and office for the Gorilla Doctors team in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is so exciting. And this office and lab will be built at Virunga National Park headquarters in Rumangabo.
Jan, I just want our audience to understand what a huge impact this will make for our team in DR Congo. Currently, our rented office is based in Goma, which is about 45 kilometers from Rumangabo and the park. It's very rough road and often too unsafe to even travel the road. So having a permanent facility at the park is going to transform our ability to rapidly respond to gorilla health emergencies. I know that this gift also has very deep personal meaning for you.
Yes, it sure does. Virunga National Park is actually one of my favorite places on Earth. It's a place where the beauty is absolutely astounding. And there's a deep history of hard-fought and courageous conservation work. During my years as a gorilla doctor, I had the honor of working in Congo right alongside Dr. Eddie and his team and Emmanuel and his team. And during that time, I experienced firsthand their dedication and courage as they worked every day to protect the gorillas and the park. We sincerely thank both of these teams for their important work, especially during these difficult times. And it's our hope that this new office and laboratory on site will make their work more efficient and have an even more positive impact on the health of and conservation of mountain gorillas.
Jan, we know it will. From all of us at Gorilla Doctors, we thank you and the Columbus Zoo for this truly amazing gift. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity. And I'm really looking forward to the rest of the program today.
Great. Thanks, Jan. Okay, Emmanuel and Eddie, are you with us?
Yeah.
Hi, Emmanuel.
Hi, Kirsten.
Hi, Eddie. It's a thrill to have you both with us.
Hi, Kirsten.
For those of you in the audience, if you're new to Gorilla Doctors, Dr. Eddie is our head veterinarian in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and he has been with Gorilla Doctors since 2004. Eddie, this means next year is your 20th year anniversary with us. Can you believe?
Yes, that's true. I can believe it. Years run very fast.
That's
to believe.
sure. Emmanuel, how are you today? It looks like you're zooming in from a tent. For this audience, I'm guessing you don't need an introduction, but just in case. You have
Well,
served as the director of Virunga National Park since 2008, right?
that's right. Yeah, I've been in Virunga about the same amount of time as Eddie. We've grown up together through extraordinary ups and downs. On the whole, more ups than downs, thankfully.
Yeah.
And so it's been an extraordinary journey. Yeah, we're thrilled to be with you. You've been with us all along, keeping our most precious cargo on that journey safe, which are of course these extraordinary mountain gorillas in the park.
Thanks, Emmanuel. I think we'll probably touch on some of those ups and downs in the course of our conversation. So I know our audience is waiting for us to dive into our conversation, but I'd love for each of you to tell us about a moment or a memory of the park that really illuminates just how special this place is for you and for the world. Emmanuel, would you mind going first?
Well, I would have responded very differently yesterday when we were talking. Today our lives have been overwhelmed by the events of this morning, when we lost Ndezi, our much loved gorilla at the Senkwekwe Center. It's left us absolutely gutted. It's absolutely devastating for the team, and I know our feelings are shared by you, who've worked so incredibly hard to keep Ndezi and her family going for so many years. She was an extraordinary gorilla, but she also had such an incredible influence on my life. I wouldn't have been director of Virunga National Park had it not been for the events that near her mother and her father were killed by militias, and we were to recover her on the body of her mother. And then Eddie took care of her, along with your colleagues, and performed one of the most extraordinary miracles of restoring the life of an infant gorilla that was just a few days old. Most people would say that's an impossible achievement. And then Eddie, with a whole number of extraordinary rangers in Virunga, cared for her for all those years. And she actually turned out to be one of our strongest soldiers. She fought the battle against illegal oil. She became the main character in our struggle to keep this oil company from destroying Virunga between 2009 and 2015 because of her extraordinary charisma. And she caught the heart of the entire world and made the struggle in Virunga to keep it safe and to keep the oil interests out of the park. She made it a global issue so that Virunga became the only park on earth to have won against big oil. So just as her surviving in the early days of her life was an impossible feat, so too pushing big oil out of Virunga was supposed to be an impossible objective, which in the end we won. And that's really the story of Virunga, is taking on these impossible these impossible objectives and somehow struggling on. This year has been terribly hard. We've lost 13 of our staff who've been killed in ambushes by militia because of the upsurge in the Civil War. So it's been an extraordinary struggle, and yet there remains that incredible determination to keep going. And alongside those terrible tragedies, there have been these extraordinary achievements. 12,000 young men and women have been given employment around the park in these different enterprises built by the park. And we've just finished the wildlife survey in Virunga for the savannas. The average increase across all species for the savanna species of the park is over 400% since we did the survey in 2014. Over that period, we suffered Ebola, we suffered the collapse of tourism because of the COVID pandemic. There was the volcanic eruption that caused enormous damage to the park's infrastructure, and then these terrible civil wars. But actually, the park is being rebuilt. It's doing extraordinarily well. And more than anything else, the mountain gorillas, they've become, in large part thanks to your efforts and the efforts of the rangers who keep working alongside the local communities. The gorilla numbers have more than doubled since the war started. That really makes it one of the greatest achievements in conservation, in modern conservation, for a critically endangered species. So we do remain hopeful, and we're a strong team thanks to you.
Thank you for painting a picture of what it's like to be there, really on the front lines of the many threats to the park. Eddie, I know you remember well the day that Ndezi came under our care. I think it's lovely the way you portrayed her, Emmanuel, as really a symbol of the hope and the success and the wins that the park has had. Eddie, I know, Ndezi is just one of many young gorillas and young chimpanzees that you have cared for over the years, and they are a symbol of the amount of pressure in that area on natural resources. That the wildlife trafficking continues, and one of our important roles in Eastern Congo as gorilla doctors is to assist the park and the Congolese wildlife authorities with the rescue of infant gorillas and chimpanzees. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about some of your experience, even in the last few months, Eddie. I know you've had your hands on quite a few infant chimpanzees that we've cared for and transferred to Luwero.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. And I really appreciate what has been done on ground as efforts to maintain these endangered species around, still alive, mostly the mountain gorilla in the forest, in their natural habitat. And as you may know, really we have been going through many challenges around in my country, which I really love, and which is rich in biodiversity. Mostly where we are working here in Virunga National Park, we've been a lot of various species, wildlife species, increasing in different areas. However, this has been also with really serious challenges, like as just we are talking about, there's how he came out to be captive, and along with other captive like chimpanzees, which are always coming through Goma Airport after being confiscated by RCCN and Virunga, especially from poachers, from traffickers. So we always take care of these animals before we transfer them to another country place where we think they can be rehabilitated, with the plan in future to think that we may end up in having them back in the wild, which is something really we would wish every time we have these animals, we know they are wild, and their better place is in the wild. So this has been really a challenging time when we are facing some unrest time, and with good communication with birth authorities, we've been able to rescue some of these and to be able to intervene whenever it's possible when we have some calls from the park for any sick animal, just to see how better we can maintain this wildlife for the next generations. So this has been one of the battles we are going through. We do it through our One Health approach. So I think this is really crucial. We should keep it going on despite our challenges we are going through.
Thanks, Eddie. You know, there's something about what you just said made me think about the fact that as veterinarians, you know, we really feel obligated. It's our role to provide care for these animals that are affected by their interaction with humanity. The park where you both work is a World Heritage Site. It belongs to all of us. It belongs to all of humanity. And I think that I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that sense or that philosophy must be in your hearts and must be part of what helps motivate you both to operate under really extraordinary circumstances in and around the park. That park is a very special place. It belongs to the world, and and the animals that it protects and hosts are ours to treasure. And I wondered if, Emmanuel, you could speak a bit to the fact that it, you know, where you work is a very, very special place on Earth, but it is also uniquely a uniquely challenging place to work for so many reasons. And you touched on those a bit to start, but certainly for us as gorilla doctors, just the level of that challenges often makes it difficult for us all to do our work.
No, you're absolutely right. It's you know, for us, Virunga is the greatest national park on Earth. And you know, while we may be a little bit biased, there is some you know, there is some evidence to that belief. It's the park that has the greatest number of species of birds, reptiles, mammals for any park on Earth. You know, it's believed to have more than 50% of all the African continent's terrestrial species represented within it. And it has these extraordinary landscapes, you know, that go from the summit of the Ruwenzori's with its glaciers at over 17,000 feet, all the way down to these extraordinary tropical moist forests of the Ituri, which is one of the last great untouched forest blocks, tropical forest blocks left on Earth, where you have the okapi. And so that does make it something incredibly special. If we do value our natural environment, if we value our planet, then Virunga has to be one of our greatest priorities. And in protecting it, and my God, you know, that has been an extraordinary effort and an extraordinary success to protect that park. It hasn't lost a single species since Congo got its independence. It's really for the benefit of the whole of humanity, of all of us, all around the world, that value that extraordinary wildlife. But we have to remember at the same time that there is this extraordinary benefit. There's also a cost. And that cost is the cost that is borne by the 11 million people who live on the immediate boundary of the national park. It's an incredibly human national park, and we have to remember that. And those who live there are amongst the poorest people on earth. In not being able to access the resources of that national park because it's protected, they're forfeiting their wealth. It's an incredible example of injustice to expect those people living around the park to have to forfeit their access to the land so that the rest of the world can benefit from the national park. Now, obviously, allowing a free-for-all on the national park is not the answer, but we do have to find an alternative. We do have to find a way of ensuring that the benefits of this national park are equal to the cost of not exploiting the land within the park, or at least equal. And so that's really what the work has been about, is to generate extraordinary benefits from Virunga without destroying it. And the arrival of the oil business in 2009 really, well, actually, I'll rephrase that. Certainly the oil company coming to Virunga was a wake-up call, but the biggest wake-up call of all, again, was the incidents surrounding Ndesi's Ndesi becoming an orphan, her parents being killed. And what we found, it took us over a year of investigation to understand that, was that people weren't killing the gorillas for the gorillas, they were killing the gorillas to access the forest, the gorillas' habitat. And killing the gorillas was to discourage the rangers from protecting the forest, which was incredibly valuable for charcoal. It was worth, back then, over $35 million a year. And unless we as conservationists can find an alternative to charcoal, they will continue to attack the forest because they have no alternative. People can't survive without fuel wood. It's critical for their food, but also for their health. If you don't boil your water, you risk death in these environments. And so what we found is that it was those very forests that are the forests of the mountain gorillas that offered the answer, not from the biological resources, the forest itself, but the river networks that they were supporting. They're incredibly rich in energy, and that network of streams becomes a network of rivers, which becomes these incredible torrents, which can be converted into electricity, and offers an extraordinary alternative to the destruction of forest for fuel wood. And so the last, ever since Ndesi was recovered, our efforts have been to try and produce electricity to keep those forests safe. And today we have the biggest supply of electricity in the whole of Eastern Congo comes from Virunga National Park. Over 12,000 jobs have been created in small businesses that have grown as a result of that cheap, clean energy coming from the park. And so that obviously gives us a very bright pathway for the future. And I could talk about that for many hours, because it's an incredibly exciting development that really captures the extraordinary entrepreneurial and positive spirit of the culture of the people around Virunga, which is really the greatest resource of all.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Some of the numbers you just shared are just exceptional, including the first one you shared about the numbers of people living in around the park. I think many, many millions. Eddie, as a gorilla doctor, of course, one of you and I and our team, we worry a lot about the potential for diseases going from people to the gorillas. The gorillas are nearly identical to us genetically, which means they're susceptible to disease. You know, Emmanuel, I know you'll remember the 2018-2020 Ebola virus outbreak, which the outbreak zone came right up against the park, kilometers from the gorilla sector, but still it was an extremely scary time because we know that diseases in a human population can spill over and affect gorillas. And I wondered, Eddie, if you could talk a little bit about what Gorilla Doctors has done over the years to just work with the communities that Emmanuel described, these incredibly industrious and entrepreneurial, hardworking people in the communities around the park who recognize the value of the park, but also need to understand how their behaviors or the way they live their lives can have a direct effect on the health of the gorillas. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how we've engaged with some of those communities?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm very happy to hear what Director has been just briefing about what is being done so far. And we are really witnessing this around here in the region. Really, many lives is getting out of poverty. As we said, with the high human population density around the park, we have those challenges like deforestation, which just increase the interface between human and animals, which, you know, may increase the risk of disease transmission to mostly the gorillas, which, you know, we share very little about genome with them. We are closely related and we share many diseases with these animals. So, and with what which happened during the outbreaks of Ebola and many other diseases, COVID coming in and other allied diseases, gorilla doctors focusing on like disease surveillance on the park within One Health approach, were able just to be focused on like One Health awareness, just to increase that awareness about those risks of disease transmission, going in communities to try to show how bad it can be for any single animal to get a disease which can spread easily to others. As you know, Virunga Massif, which is connected to other parks in the region, like in Rwanda and Uganda. And I will try just to highlight that Virunga is very special on its own, having the 3 subspecies, if I can tell them, like all the mountain, not 3 subspecies, like I can say, it has all the eastern gorilla species. We have a portion where we have gorilla, which is similar to the one of Bwindi. We have a grouse gorilla, the same park having all these. Is really something we are proud of, and we really need to focus our effort to protect it. And when we are seeing this deforestation and seeing how their power plants are being constructed, is something which is really a pain reliever, which we can just feel to address these challenges and poverty and deforestation around the park. So this is really exciting, and we keep focused on disease surveillance and promote education on health, because with this high density population, there are problems of poor health and education. So it's crucial to make good plan for education and land use plan. That's all.
Thanks, Eddie. You mentioned One Health and the perspective that the health of people and animals and the environment they share are inextricably linked. That kind of runs that's in our DNA, that runs through our blood. It's really the approach we take to all the work we do. And there was something about what you were saying earlier, Emmanuel, that made me think that, part of it seems to me, from my perspective, that part of your success at the Virunga National Park is that you have taken this very holistic, comprehensive approach to protection of the park. It's not just about keeping people out. It's about also providing opportunities for livelihood improvement in the communities. And I know that in particular, Rumangabo, which is the community where many of the park rangers live and where your headquarters is situated, where our future facility will be built, is a special community, in part because it represents so many of the rangers in that Mikeno sector of the park and their families. And I'll never forget a text I got from you, Eddie, earlier this year, I believe it was. You were with all of the Rumangabo community that remained in that community, and in a secure place, in fact, a cave that is a place for security. It happened to be in a time when things were particularly dangerous, and Emmanuel, you provided for the security and well-being of not only the entire village of Rumangabo, but also our Dr. Eddie. So I wanted to thank you for that. But it just points to the fact that it's challenging place to work. Emmanuel, you talked about how many rangers have lost their lives on the job. You yourself have been grievously injured on the job. This is a place where I think you all are taking risks to do what you know is the right thing to do. And I just wanted to acknowledge that for this audience. We talked about our conservation heroes. You two are two of mine for sure. But I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you make decisions about your work on a daily basis. Just what does that mean for you both in your jobs on the ground? If you could maybe share a little bit about what that looks like with this audience.
Yeah, I'll make a start, and then Eddie can speak volumes on that as well. So you choose a job in life, and then you do that job. You don't necessarily choose what comes with it down the road, but once you've made that decision, you stick to it. I chose to do conservation in Virunga. I came to Congo 30 years ago, 1993. And today we're living through our fifth civil war. Each one of them has been horrific, but working through that with an extraordinary team has also been just an unbelievable privilege, because you're so incredibly supported when you're in the position I have, and that actually makes it so much easier than it seems from the outside. When I took the job, within 2 weeks, the CNDP civil war started. It was a very violent war, and all of the rangers were forced out of Rumangabo, and we had to set up our own refugee camp, as it were, our own IDP camp in Goma, under horrific conditions. We had cholera, we had multiple deaths amongst the staff and their families, and we made the decision then that we would never ever abandon the park, and it was something we discussed with all the rangers. I remember it as if it was yesterday, and there wasn't a single one that wasn't absolutely in agreement. And so we all went back in the middle of the war to Rumangabo. And because we did that, we gained the support of both sides that were fighting each other. to continue the work in the park. And that's something that's stuck ever since, to the point that Congo has ratified a new law for the conservation of nature that states in its articles that Congo's rangers are neutral during periods of armed conflict and are required to continue their work. And that really gives us the basis at last to do exactly that, to continue the work. And so when Eddie and I and the team of uniformed staff found ourselves in October last year under artillery fire again in Virunga, we were able to stay, we were able to maintain communications, and we were able to establish an understanding that we were not a part of this war. Our job was to preserve and protect the park and our partners in the community. So we've been able to continue to do that and to continue to supply the city of Goma, a city of 2 million people, with electricity throughout the war. That electricity supplies water, because the pumping stations are powered by the park's water, and in particular to build and deliver water to the 800,000 internally displaced families around the city of Goma. So the park really does play an important role because we never leave. And so it is a struggle, but in fulfilling that struggle, extraordinary things happen. I'd like to just give one other anecdote, which is health related, and it really it captures the spirit of what you call One Health. It's an integrated approach that touches almost every aspect of human society and the natural ecosystems. When Ebola broke out, it turned out to be the second worst Ebola epidemic in the disease's known history. And it was in and around Virunga. And so, of course, Eddie and your team got to work. On our side, we had a good hard look at what the park represented, and it became, simply by looking at a map, it became what later became referenced by the World Health Organization as the firewall, the natural firewall for Ebola. It's a national park that stretches 300 kilometers around the Ebola affected area, and the park's rangers and their medical staff built health checks everywhere where the roads crossed the rivers in the park, so that anybody leaving the Ebola affected area was fully controlled. We were asked to join the Ebola Response Committee with the World Health Organization, the Ministry of Health, and so on, because of the extraordinary role that the park was playing in containing the Ebola epidemic. It was horrific, but it could have been so much worse if it had spread into Eastern Africa through Virunga National Park. And so those are things we tend to forget now because we deal with the crisis of the moment. But, there are endless stories of achieving, really difficult challenges that needed to be done during these multiple crises that we've been through.
Extraordinary that effort not only protected millions of people, it also protected the gorillas. So another huge gratitude to the park for that effort, because we know that Ebola is incredibly lethal for gorillas. And so, yes, pins and needles for 2 years during the world's second largest Ebola outbreak that happened to be happening at the doorstep of, one of the most important parts of the world for mountain gorillas. I think your points about how your team and staff came together in that the first of the wars that you had to deal with as director of the park, and making that commitment to being in Rumangabo is in many ways what we feel we're doing as gorilla doctors now, because it's been our dream to be co-located with you at park headquarters in Rumangabo. I think Eddie could probably keep us in Zoom for the next many hours talking about the number of times that there have been needs for veterinary care in and around the park when getting there was difficult for any number of reasons. And so I know I speak for our team in just saying that we're incredibly glad to be moving to be in Rumangabo with you. We feel it's a signal to you and our other partners in Congo that we are 100% wholly dedicated and committed to our mission and our partnerships with you. So we couldn't, again, be more delighted that's in our very near future to be at park headquarters with you. And I am seeing my chat box is scrolling with questions. So I think maybe again, we could probably talk for hours and hours, but I'd like to give our audience a chance to hear some of their questions answered by you both. So I think we're going to go to the Q&A session. One question that intrigued me, and in part it's because of something you said, Emmanuel, about the park going from the Ruwenzori's to the Ituri forest. It expands probably every single type of habitat and landscape that exists in Africa, in the central part of Africa. And one of our questions comes from Dr. Alan Goodall, whom you probably know, who remarked that he climbed the Ruwenzori's in January 1980. And he is wondering what is left of the glaciers that he saw then. And I think I'm posing the question to you because, of course, climate change will and is having impacts on parks and natural areas around the world. When we think about our work as gorilla doctors, we worry about things like changes in vector-borne disease, the range of mosquitoes and other insects that could spread disease. These are very real changes that are happening very rapidly. But I think Dr. Goodall's question about whether that's already resulting in some significant changes in the very, very highest altitudes of the park is an interesting one.
Was that question for me, Kirsten?
Yes. What you can tell us about how the park is changing with climate change.
Yeah. So I would love to answer that question, because I made the equally crazy decision to try and climb the Ruwenzori's a couple of years ago. And we made it to Margarita, climbing up on the Congolese side. I think we were the first to do it for a very long time. And we slept on the glacier, and all night you could hear the melting of the glacier through the ice, and these floods of water under this melting glacier. And what really, the feeling, the slightly dull feeling that it left me with in the morning was that of all the extraordinary challenges that we're faced with that affect the destruction of Virunga's ecosystems, I genuinely feel we can overcome them all except one, and that's the melting of the glaciers on the Ruwenzori's, and that really is beyond our powers, because that's the outcome of the entire world economy. And so yeah, it's a tough one. When I started working in Virunga, they said by 2025 there would be no glaciers on the Ruwenzori's. There are still glaciers, but they're a fraction of what they once were. which is a real shame.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier, we're always keeping in mind that we may see other signals of climate change effects on the biodiversity of the park in terms of the health of the gorillas. That's something we remain ever vigilant for. I wondered, Eddie, if you would like to share your thoughts on a question from Chloe Greenbank. She asks if there is a limit to the number of primates that can stay and thrive in the wild, given the limited natural habitat and the human encroachment on Virunga National Park. Do you have a sense that the population of gorillas can continue to grow? What is it? Let us know what your thoughts are on that.
Thank you for that question. That's one of the great one. And we've been having the same questions anytime we are having the result from census. For now, as we have 1,063 gorillas, which we think about among mountain gorillas. And that question for capacity carrying is still one of the big questions we have addressed. But I can say at the moment, we still have some room. Like for Mikeno sector is large part, so the other gorilla can still have room inside. So we still have some numbers to welcome in this area for some years. But with this climate change, we know if some good work is done to reduce the deforestation, to reinforce the law in conservation, and to educate people, I think we will come up in maintaining some good numbers of these gorillas for the next generation. So, like combining those action to reduce deforestation, and if it can come up also to reinforce that with people starting using gas, like if some government can work on reducing taxes on importing some gases, people can really have still low pressure on this environment. So that's what I could say for that. We still have room for more gorillas at the moment.
Which is why we always celebrate when there's a new infant growing the population. I have an interesting question from Florence Peru, for both of you. First of all, thank you for the webinar, but a question about building these facilities for gorilla doctors in Virunga, and whether that means that there will be veterinarians based on site. I can even answer that. That's exactly what it means. And I know I can speak for Eddie, but the rest of our Congo team, that will be our base of operations in Congo. We have a station down in Kahuzi-Biega National Park as well. We have a veterinarian who's permanently based at Kahuzi-Biega to monitor and assist with the health of the habituated growers gorillas in Kahuzi-Biega National Park. But for our work in Virunga National Park, we will be completely based in Rumagabo, which we're excited about. But another question for you, Emmanuel, to start is: do you think that the park will be able to welcome tourists again soon? When and how will that happen?
Oh gosh, I wish I knew. That's the question that we go to sleep thinking about, and we wake up about in the morning, if we sleep at all. The return of visitors to Virunga would be the expression of the end of the war, would be an expression of the end of the war. And so it's obviously something we look forward to enormously, being able to welcome people. It's also an incredible boost for the national park. I think tourism has played an incredibly important role in keeping the mountain gorillas safe. It's also a threat, but on balance, it's an incredible support to the survival of the mountain gorillas. and it's something we desperately need. We haven't had visitors since 2018 on any significant scale, and that's been weight on on the growth and on the restoration of the park. But as to when it'll happen, that's so far out of our control. We really are at the mercy of these very powerful military forces that are battling in and around the national park, and it's really they who will determine when peace comes back. But the one thing is certain: we won't allow visitors to come back until we're absolutely certain that we can keep them safe. And so that's obviously the condition. And for now, it's just impossible to have visitors in Virunga.
We've had a few people ask a similar question. Fantasine Kakule, Mac Farnham, both of them asking how, you're obviously an incredibly resilient team, the park, our Gorilla Doctors team on the ground. Could you share with us what is your secret and to maintaining that resilience, maintaining that hope? I realize that's kind of a squishy question, but there is something that you have in your hearts and your minds about your work and your positions that keep you going despite these challenges. And I think those words would be very inspiring for all of us. Eddie, what keeps you dedicated to this work? 20 years now you've been a gorilla doctor, and you've had some very extraordinary experiences on the job. And what is it that keeps you dedicated despite the risk and the worry?
Yeah, that's a great question and really good one. Yeah, as we are saying, mountain and gorilla are unique in the world, and this is the only habitat to have this. And I'm lucky to be part of the people who can take care of these animals and preserve them for the next generation, so the whole world can come and visit them there. And these animals being here, they are contributing to the economy of my country and to the education of the whole world. And this is there also really to, when tourists are coming and when we are seeing all these projects, they are there because of the presence of these gorillas. So they are very important for my country, and is part of thing which can bring me to say, okay, let's preserve these gorillas and train more veterinarian. After 20 years, during the 20 years, we've been having a new student joining, like getting some training in gorilla health monitoring. So we need to keep this going, just not only for us, but for our kids and for great children and so on. That's what is giving me that big motivation to this. So it's unique to my country. It's very special to my country and very special for the whole world. What is bringing in my country is a lot to make it the economically developed. Yeah.
Thanks, Eddie. Emmanuel, how about you?
I would
maintain
echo
that resilience and that commitment.
I mean, I would echo Eddie's words. Virunga really matters, and when you're surrounded with extraordinary people in an extraordinary place, you enjoy every day you have. It may seem hard. It's actually amazing. I think we all feel incredibly lucky to be doing this work. and you know, we can't wait for the next day to come. It's been a thrill all along. Of course, you know, there are moments of extraordinary tragedy that dampen that, you know, the enjoyment we get from doing this work, that make it incredibly difficult. But again, you know, that's a source of motivation. We have to make that sacrifice worthwhile. That's a responsibility that, you know, that gets thrust upon us. And so, you know, that only adds to the commitment. Yeah, you know, I find that a relative, you know, a very, it's a very easy answer, a very easy question to answer, in many ways.
Well, one of our audience members, Nick Mader, said it well, and I couldn't say it better. Thank you both, Emmanuel and Eddie, for your commitment and your passion. It's truly amazing and inspiring. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time. We've got a minute to go. I don't know where the hour went. Emmanuel and Eddie, thank you so much for your insight and your commitment, and perhaps more than anything else during these very turbulent times that we are living in. Thank you for being examples of hope in action. You're both a total inspiration, and it's really an honor to work with you. And that goes for each of you in our audience as well. Your support makes our work possible, and we are so grateful to you and for you. Thank you for considering year-end gift to Gorilla Doctors and Virunga National Park. On behalf of Gorilla Doctors, I wish you and your families a very peaceful holiday season. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, Emmanuel. Bye, Eddie.
Bye.